Hey everyone, this is with Sense of Life Games, and I am excited to welcome you back to another update on my game, Vanderbuild. And I know that it's been a little bit longer. It's been 3 weeks since my last update instead of the kind of 2-week period that I'm aiming for. There's a few contributing factors to that. The day job has been pretty busy and intense in a good way. And that's led to just, unfortunately, having less time to work on my game. And then also I've been traveling, so to both California and the Northeast. So kind of the opposite ends of the states here in the country. So anyways, if you recall, last time that I had an update, I had shifted the entire game's perspective to a bird's eye view, looking down at the game from above, and gotten everything kind of working from there. And the next part that I wanted to get into was talking about the conversation system, the role-playing aspect of this game. And quite frankly, I had no idea where to start that. And I was concerned that if I had built something in Unity, mucking around with the Unity user interface and kind of the clunkiness involved there, that it would be distracting to what I was actually trying to figure out, which is how to build a role-playing system and a conversation system that's actually going to work in my game. So for all of that reasons, I decided to start a simple C# project in the console, completely separate from my game project, where I would just be able to keep it really, really simple, make changes pretty quickly without having to worry about any Unity complications, and just kind of try it and see what happened. So that's what I want to show you guys here today. Oh, and today is Sunday, September 24th, for those of you who are keeping track. So hope you're having a good weekend. So what I created here was I wanted to have two different non-player characters, NPCs, and I wanted them to have pretty different personalities, because one thing that I think is pretty that's going to be a factor in my game is meeting different kinds of people, different kinds of business owners, different kinds of customers, figuring out what kind of personality types they have, and then that's going to influence how you have to work with them, how you talk to them in order to negotiate a business contract so that you can move their goods around the New York area. And so what I have here is two different NPCs. So let me just go ahead through this main menu here. This main menu just lets you talk, sleep, or quit. Quitting isn't too interesting. That would be the end of the video. Sleeping just moves you to the next day. So let's go with talking. And once you choose talking, then you have a choice of two NPCs. You have Howard and you have Peter. And Howard is kind of a really straight to business, no nonsense, no time for pleasantries. Just come at me with your offer. That's how you're going to get his respect. That's how you're going to get his trust, and so on. Peter, on the other hand, that's a guy that needs all the pleasantries before he's willing to kind of say what and offer you a job to ship some of his goods around. So two different people, two different ways to approach them. So let's start with Howard here. So I'm going to type 1. I'm now talking to Howard, and I get a choice of several different ways that I can approach Howard. Now, everything up to now, right, has been very specific to the console. I have a main menu, I choose to talk, I choose who to talk to, right? In the game, that's going to be different. That's going to be, I'm on a screen, and I see Howard, and I see Peter. There are two different NPCs that I see on my screen, and I can go walk up to one and click on it to start talking to that NPC. So up to now, this is all kind of specific to the console. Once I get into the conversation here, then this is something that I think would actually be visible in the Unity user interface. It's how you want to approach Howard here with your conversation. And you have several different options. You can approach him in a direct fashion, friendly, curious, arrogant, or you can just say, hey, bye. I know I said hi, but I don't really want to talk to you. And like I mentioned earlier, Howard is a very direct person. So he likes no time for pleasantries. No time for any of that stuff. He likes for you to come directly at him. So let's demonstrate that here, and I will select 1 for direct. And so when I get into here, these are going to be text bubbles that just kind of appear in the Unity user interface. But for right now, they just kind of pop out onto the console. But in the Unity user interface, it would show you who's talking, what they're saying. And I should mention, these are all really, really hard coded in here. And when we get to talking to Peter, we're going to see an example of just how that doesn't fit for talking to that NPC. But anyways, there's a lot of work to go. This is just kind of proof of concept stage, very early stages here. So what the player says is, you look busy, so I'm not going to try to waste your time. I can beat your current shipper. And Howard says, really? I like how direct you are. And then he follows up with, my current shipper never shows up on time, so I don't know when to have the lumber ready, right? The idea here is that Howard runs a lumber mill, and he needs to get his lumber taken to Manhattan so they can, I don't know, build ships or masts or things like that with it. Maybe build some buildings. I have no idea what they're going to do with the lumber. It doesn't matter. But he wants his lumber to get to Manhattan. You have a boat. You can take the lumber to Manhattan. That's what he's telling you. His current shipper never shows up on time. So when I click enter again, this is just kind of the end state that I have right now in the conversation system. But the idea here is this is the winning condition, right? This means that you've successfully navigated the conversation, and now Howard is ready to do business with you, at least try some. And from here, I would see this going to some sort of negotiation where you can offer and say, hey, you know what? Sounds good. Tomorrow I will be at your lumber mill here at 8 o'clock sharp, and I will get all that lumber on my boat and off to Manhattan. So you can now you can start to demonstrate to Howard that you can be trusted to show up on time. However, let's say that you take a different approach with Howard. So if you come in there and you can see it's a little bit before 9 o'clock local time. My kids are not yet out of their room, so this is a good time to record this video. So let's say you talk again with Howard. We're now talking with Howard. And let's say you decide, you know what? Howard looks friendly. Let's come at him from a friendly angle. So we say, hey there, it's a lovely day. And Howard says, I don't have time for this. And then kind of doesn't really make a further request of you. So you have another option, right? He's giving you one warning to say, I don't like that friendly approach. Well, let's say, you know what, he doesn't look like the kind of guy that wants to have someone just come up and offer something to him. So I'm going to come at him in a curious fashion. I'm going to say, hello, what are you doing there? And he says, I don't like you, right? And this is because you've taken two opportunities. And from Howard's point of view, he thinks, you're wasting my time. I've got no time for this. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Go bother someone else. Well, now Howard is done talking with you, and that didn't work out so well. Right now, this is kind of the losing condition in the conversation. You did not do anything you did not successfully navigate the conversation to get to a point where you can actually start to talk business with Howard. So we're popped back to the main menu, and you can see it's still day one. And you might be wondering what that is. Well, if I remember, we annoyed Howard today, right? And he's done talking to us. So if I say talk and choose Howard again, Howard just doesn't want to talk to me. So he's done. I lost my chance to talk to Howard for today. But what about tomorrow? So let me sleep. So I'm going to sleep, and now you can see that it is day 2 here. And let me try talking to Howard again. So now that it's day 2, Howard's ready to talk again. He's ready to give us another chance. So we come in there, right? We say, sorry, Howard, you don't like friendly, you don't like curious. Maybe you respond well to arrogant. And just FYI, arrogant is a bad option for both Howard and Peter. Neither of them like that. I'm not sure anybody would. And I'm not sold on these kind of ways that you approach the conversation and things. I think there's a lot further refinements here. But this is just kind of, again, proof of concept, early stage here, right? So I come in here and I go to Howard in an arrogant fashion. And I say, your current shipper sucks. Why don't you use someone like me? Well, this really does not strike Howard the right way. And again, he gets our curt response, I don't like you, go bother someone else. Howard's done talking to us. Right, but what did I just learn on yesterday? I learned that, you know what, you give Howard a day to sleep on it, and he's in a better mood. So maybe tomorrow he'll talk to us again, right? So I'm going to sleep, and now you'll see it's day 3, and I'm going to talk again to Howard. But Howard still doesn't want to talk to us. Howard hates arrogant people so much that you've actually annoyed him for several days. And I could keep sleeping. I think it's on day 4 or 5 where his tolerance for you finally comes back, that he's actually willing to talk to you. So that's a little bit of an example. And then let me also just kind of show you here what happens when you talk to Peter. So if I talk to Peter. Now, Peter is somebody that, again, like I mentioned earlier, he's somebody that likes the pleasantries. He needs to be warmed up a little bit. If you come at him with just a business offer right out the top without really getting to know him at all, then he doesn't like that. So let's do a direct approach with Peter. And you can say, and again, it's the same text here, right? And this is an example of it not really fitting. But the player says, you look busy, so I'm not going to waste your time. I can beat your current shipper. And Peter says, I don't have time for this, right? That's kind of Howard's response, right? But this is just a negative NPC response. They use the exact same words. Obviously not very realistic there. Okay, but Peter has given us another chance to come at him differently. So let's try friendly. And we say, hey there, it's a lovely day. And he says, really? I like how direct you are. Again, example of this really not fitting the text, right? But Peter would use different words here. But Peter likes that response. So we did friendly, let's try curious. Again, we say, hello, what are you doing there? And Peter again says, really? I like how direct you are. You can see now that when the NPC responds in a favorable fashion to what you said, that's just what they say. Again, this probably shows you guys you guys can guess which NPC I created first, which was Howard, and just reused all those text prompts for Peter here as well. So again, but now that I did a friendly and a curious approach, Peter is open to talking business with me. So we get the Peter is done talking to you, that went well. This is the success condition, right? So we won that conversation, quote unquote. So that's kind of what we got. That's what I've got going on here. That's what I wanted to show you guys. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the changes that I went through in this. And when I first did it, it was very straight line procedural oriented. It was you write this text out to the console, you block the main thread while you read the input from the user, and then that has new text coming out, and it was looping until you met a certain condition and you lost the conversation or you won the conversation. And once I got that basic model working, I realized, that's really, really, really not going to work well for Unity. It's not going to work well, quite frankly, for any kind of user interface, because in any user interface, blocking the main thread means it can't do anything, right? So if I put up a dialogue, I say, how do you want to start the conversation with Howard? And there's 4 different options of how you can start that conversation with him. And those are 4 different buttons on your screen. And I block that main thread. That means nothing else is going to be going on in the background, right? There's not going to be any ships moving around. There's not going to be any clouds. The game looks frozen until you actually click on the darn button. So what I wanted to do was then separate that logic and make something that this core role-playing element of the personalities, how you can talk to them, how they respond. I wanted to make that something that can be reused both in the console app and in Unity. And of course, I kind of came to that decision, and then if you guys have been keeping track with anything regarding Unity over the last couple of weeks, well, there's been some drama there with Unity dropping a bomb in terms of their new install fee pricing structure and the community backlash to that, and then Unity kind of backtracking things. So again, that was something that's kind of delayed things here, as kind of waiting to see how that all unfolded. Not entirely sure how it's still going to unfold. But anyways, the important point here that I'm trying to make is that what I wanted to do was create a core role-playing element with all this kind of logic of who you talk to, how you can talk to them, how they respond, the points that you win with them, all that kind of stuff in a way that can be used in the console, that can be used in Unity. And by the way, that also means it could be used in a different game engine as well. So what I'm going to do here is just pop you over to my Git repo and just kind of show you through the program.c# file here and just kind of walk you through a little bit about how I changed this. And a big part of what was involved here was really making this something so that core conversation engine, if you will, I refactored it a lot to make it a finite state machine. And that's, if you're not familiar with that, it's basically it's a core concept in computer science that keeps track of a different state. So the different states I have are things like, oh, I am waiting for the player to acknowledge a message, right? That's when it said player said something to Howard, and then the console said, please press enter to continue, right? But instead of pressing enter in a Unity or in a game thing, that might be click on a button, right? Or a different state might be, oh, I'm waiting for the player to pick an option. So when you start talking with an NPC, then you get those 4 different options of how you want to present, how you want to introduce the conversation. And those would be different buttons. In the console version, they're just different numbered, different items in a numbered list. And you type in the right number and then it selects that. So what I wanted to show here was just kind of the old logic and the new logic. And these red lines, those are lines that were deleted in this commit, and the green lines were lines that were added. So just kind of some basic conventions there. And you can see that the old talk method here just called this start conversation with NPC. And you can see that that's right down here. And what the new one does is right here. So we start a new conversation, and that gets us an output. This is an output from the finite state machine. And then what we do is we say, while that output isn't the end, we are going to process that output. And by the way, processing output is going to give us the next output. And it's a little hard to see this non-blocking behavior here because this is in the console program. So this is the program that's doing all those text-based menus and waiting for returns. So this is operating in a blocking fashion. But the important part here is that by getting outputs from the finite state machine, I can easily use that same finite state machine in a application that is not blocking, that I don't want to block that main thread on. Okay, so let's get a little bit into more detail here. When we get to the start conversation with function, which kind of in the new version is replaced with this process output, all of this is doing is there's basically 3 kinds of output that are in here. There is a message output. So an example of this is you are now talking to Peter, right? In the console version, that just prints out that text line and then waits for the player to press enter. In the in the user interface version in Unity, this might, well, that's a signal to say, hey, now I'm going to pop up the conversation user interface and I'm going to put a picture of Peter up there because I'm talking to Peter now. There's also an output options. This is whenever the player has a choice. So that's the finite state machine is saying, hey, the state is now I'm going to wait for you to make a choice. Here are your options. So again, in the console version, that just prints out your numbered items in a numbered list and waits for you to select 1, 2, 3, or 5. I guess 4 would be in there too as an option. And then, but in a Unity user interface or other game engine, this is going to be something that presents buttons on the screens and then continues to work in the background until the player actually clicks on one of those buttons. All right, scrolling down here a little bit further, we've got let's actually here. I think the point that I really want to make here is summarized in this on options or process output options method. So this is the method that I had in here before, and this was implemented as a callback out of the role playing engine. So this was when we reached a state where I had options. So when I'm starting the conversation with one of the non-player characters, and I want to, I want the player to have a choice of how to start off that conversation, it would call this method on options. And you can see what this does basically is it returns the value returned by prompt user for option. And you'll notice also here that the on options function here returns a value. So this is effectively a blocking function. Not effectively, it actually is a blocking function. This function is called out of the role-playing engine and blocks that whatever thread the role-playing engine is running on until it gets the option that is chosen. And then the role-playing engine can keep on chugging along and keep on continuing. But that doesn't work in a non-blocking scenario. So what I changed this to is again, it's in that loop of outputs, right? So this is process output options. And what that guy is going to do is he's going to prompt the user for an option, and then he's going to return the one that is made. And what's important here is, obviously at one level, this function is doing the same effective thing. It's prompting the user with that text-based menu, waiting for the user to make a selection, and then and then passing that back to the role-playing engine through this conversation.makeChoice method, and then passing that choice into it. So this is doing it in a blocking fashion. However, the point that I want to make here is that from the conversation point of view, there is no need for this to be blocking, because this was an output options, which is saying, hey, I'm ready for user input. These are the options. The player needs to choose one of those. And then the next step isn't made until the program calls conversation make choice. So even in this console, even though this console application here is doing it in a blocking fashion and doing it in a very linear procedural blocking fashion, there is no need for this. And this is what's really cool about this, because this means that when I integrate this into Unity, I can separate those in time. I can separate those on how the application is processing them, and I can pop up a user interface here with these options, which would be, basically calling some function here to display these options on the user interface. But I don't need to do anything in the Unity user interface code. I could just say, I'm going to go and return control of the application back to Unity. And then whenever the player does click on one of those buttons, then I can call conversation.makeChoice. So this is pretty exciting, because this lets me really just, separate that, and it's going to let me reuse that same code when I'm in Unity and when I am in the console application. So I can use the exact same logic, write test cases, automate them, all that kind of good stuff from here. And the last, I know that we're dragging on probably about time as when I should be wrapping this up, but the last thing I want to show you is just this conversation. So this is a class that would be reused in both the console version and in the Unity version, in the actual game version. So here you can see my states. This is an initial state. I'm waiting for the player to acknowledge that a message was displayed and we can go to the next step, or I'm waiting for the player to make a choice, or I'm done, right? The conversation is all done, and that would be a signal in the console one to go back to the main menu. It would be a signal in the user interface in the Unity game to dismiss the conversation interface and go back to the normal game interface. And let's just really quick here see what I want to show. Let's take a look at this. And I know this code is ugly. This is the commit before I kind of went through here and refactored some of this stuff. But let's take a look at make choice. So make choice, that's the function I was talking about earlier that's called whenever the user makes the choice and chooses one of the options that's presented to them. So here we can say, just a quick look behind the scenes. When that choice comes in, there's a bunch of error checking up here. But once we get past that, we look at this. And this is basically, it's adding an output queue. So what the role-playing engine does is maintain a queue of output objects. And if you remember, in the console version, we were looping through each object. So the role-playing engine here builds a queue of output objects, and then each time through the loop, the next output object is popped off the top and returned to the whatever code is calling it. So the first thing we're going to do here is an output message that just says the player, and it's going to put out the text of the player. So if you remember when I selected my the way that I start my conversation, this might be, hello, how you doing there? Right? That's what comes out of this output message object. And then I'm going to look and say, what did so that's basically giving me the text description, whatever the player chose, right? But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the NPC to figure out what kind of response say we're talking to Howard, what kind of response Howard has. And then we're going to add two more output messages. We're going to add one output message for the response. So maybe this is, I don't have time for this, right? If you come to Howard with either a curious or friendly thing. And then the next output message is going to be their request. And if you remember in the successful case, this was Howard saying, my current shipper never shows up on time. That's the problem that I'm having. Or if it's one of the friendly or curious ones, this is just kind of the ellipsis, the ... where he's waiting for you to make the next move. And then we've got a few more, right? We've got, if this is a request style advance, that basically means success. We advance to the next phase of the conversation. Then the output queue is going to get a new output onto the end of it, right? We're appending to the end here. the output end of true, meaning this was successful. If this is end conversation, well, this is kind of the losing scenario. So we're gonna append an output end object with false, meaning this was a fail state. You lost the conversation. Otherwise, say there are, an example here would be, again, we're talking to Howard. First thing we do, we come in friendly. He says, I don't have time for this, ... and gives you another chance to respond. He gives you the one chance, to come at him in a way that's not aligned with how he likes to talk. And then he gives you another option. So in this one, we are creating an output options. So we're coming at, again, saying the player has options here, and we're going to wait for that player or the next thing that's going to kick us into the next step here is when the player finally chooses one of these options. So we are going to append to the output queue an output options object with our message and the options that are available to us. And then let me just talk a little bit more about the output queue. This is activate next output. This is the one that basically says we're going to pop the next output from our queue. We're going to change our state, which is these options up here as to what we're actually going to be waiting for. If that's a message, we're going to be waiting for a message acknowledgement. If it's a choice, we're going to be waiting for choice, so on and so forth. And then we're going to remember the last output, which has to do with some error checking and things like that. So hopefully, I know that's a little technical here at the end, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of the things that have been going on here in terms of getting this very simple, still very rudimentary conversation system going. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that was a little bit interesting as to looking at some of the code behind the scenes. Where I'm going to go from here, unfortunately, looking at my schedule, it's going to be hard to put a lot of time on this over the next couple weeks, but I should have another update for you guys in another 2 weeks. I'm not quite sure if my next step is going to be taking what I've got now and putting it into Unity, so you can actually see it happening in game, or keep refining this system out. I'm kind of leaning right now, honestly, towards refining this system out more before getting into Unity, just in case things continue to change. The options that you're coming at it change. I don't want to build too much stuff in Unity, while things are still kind of up in the air here with how the conversations are going to work. So I think I might keep working on, either changing some of those words that pop out when you select certain options of what the non-player characters are actually saying, so it fits better, as well as probably working on the next phase. So when you get through the advanced phase and you move on to the next phase of the conversation, you can actually talk with an NPC about some sort of business deal that you're going to run for them, so that you can demonstrate that they can trust you. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed. I'm excited to make more progress on this. I know this is slow and still very early, but I'm excited about this. Making these videos and talking to you guys is definitely helping me keep motivation for this and keeping me on task to actually work on things that I can show on a regular basis. So once again, this is Happy Human with Sense of Life Games. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your weekend.